Hello there, it's Sandy Allnock with some fun that I demoed at the NAMTA Seattle trade show this past weekend. I did some bookmarks, did a bunch of other projects too, but I thought I'd share this one, especially for those who I met there who might want to do demos like this at their stores. And these are done with Staedtler Pigment pens. The techniques will work for leaves. I'll show you a little bit at the end, but we're focusing on sea critters. So I'm using the Staedtler Pigment Markers, and they're a water-based marker like all the other water-based markers you know about. They have a brush nib and that sort of thing, but they have a little different property in that they will dry permanent. So there's some things you can do with that you can't do with other things, and I'll show you a little bit of that with these examples. For a seahorse, just make like an S that's fatter in the middle and then get skinny at the top and skinny at the bottom, and make it really puddly. Just put lots of water on there. If you have to go over it twice, just lots and lots of water with your brush. See, it's puddly, shiny like that. The shinier it is, the better for some of this. And you'll have to play around with it and see what you like and how your markers react, especially if you're using another brand. I haven't tested out a bunch of other brands, but I just know water-based markers will do this. As soon as you put color in water, it'll travel through the water to various quality of marks, I guess. If you do this with watercolors, you can do it with a lot of watercolor pencils, that kind of thing. But I'm just touching it to the edge, and at the edge of a puddle it congeals a little bit, so the edges are a little bit dry, so you can almost get a line that has a bit of blending to it. And if you hit a really puddly area in the middle, sometimes it'll just burst out into color, and it's serendipity. It's one of those things that just does its own thing because it's watercolor. So for the head, just leave a little gap and put a triangle that tapers down to a little tiny nose, and then you can take a brush stroke to kind of join the neck, the back of the head together, and then just put more color in there. Now, each marker, from my experience, acts a little bit differently. And sometimes, like that one, if it's really feeling juicy and it hits a perfect puddle of water, it'll burst out into color that way. Other times, it'll just kind of slowly tip in around the edge, that sort of thing. So that's one of the reasons I like getting it really, really wet, because you have better chances of just some kind of fun happening and all of that color moving. When you're working with something like this, I recommend, while it's really sopping wet this way, if you're going to use colors together, using something that's analogous, meaning it's next to each other on the color wheel. That's going to be most helpful, because those colors aren't going to make brown. Because if you use red, blue, and yellow together, you're going to end up with brown. So test your colors. But here I can just use these analogous ones. There's, different blues, teals, and green. And just kind of let the colors smoosh around. The tail at the end just curves the other direction and then twirls inward. And you can make it twirl a whole bunch of times. You can make it twirl just a little bit. It's kind of entirely up to you. If you have a plant that you're going to draw in here that he can hold on to with his tail, that would be fun. But I was looking at pictures of seahorses, and they have spikes on the backs of them, these little things I'm drawing in. They have a fin that's basically transparent. So I put the water down, and then I put the color at the base of it, not at the tip of it. Just kind of let the color move around. I might add more to it later, which is one of the good things you can do, because you can go in after it's dry, which is what I'm doing here, and you can break it into more sections. So the body of a seahorse has like all these different striations, and it's just kind of this rugged critter. You can, make stripes on it. You can make patterns. You can make all kinds of fun things with it. And so I did that with a couple, do a couple more around the tail. And basically I just painted water over dry paper. And the only place that the color will travel is into the water, or if I put the pen on the paper, it just makes a mark right there. You can move it around for a moment. If you're using other water-based markers that aren't these pigment pens, you'll only have limited movability. If you start layering colors over top, then regular water-based markers will lift up any detail that you've created underneath because they remain movable. These pens are permanent once they dry, which means if you just did a pink wash over the entire seahorse right now, you would actually just get a color shift. All of that detail underneath would stay as long as your color was light enough to see through it. So it's kind of cool properties that these pens have and give you a lot of flexibility in the kind of thing you want to create. I gave my seahorse a nice eyeball so he could see, and then water drops into which I can drop color. Now you could put color on a plate and lift it with your brush and move it over to the paper, but it's a whole lot easier to just touch the brush to the drop of water. And if you get it too dark, just use a paper towel or a tissue and lift some up, and you'll end up with a beautiful drawing of a seahorse. The jellyfish will use the same technique, just in a slightly different way, and I'm going to show you how some of those properties can really matter when you're doing something like this. So we'll start off by making the bell at the top of the jellyfish, the body, I guess you would call it up there, and make it like a mushroom shape at the top, just rounded, and then make it have a curve at the bottom. You'll see what I mean. It's hard to tell, I know, seeing clear water painted on white paper, but it has kind of a curve at the bottom so that it starts to look like that mushroom head shape. And then just start putting some colors in it. Again, if you have nice, really wet paper, you can get some interesting watercolory effects, which are great for undersea creatures. Because undersea creatures just, if they have all different kinds of colors moving around in them, super fun. Tilt the paper around, and while it's still wet, you can drop in other colors and just watch it burst and bloom. This is one of those few things that you can do that blooms. Just embrace them because they're so much fun, and they can put so much more character into the little watercolor as the pigments are moving around. And especially when you hit one of those spots and it bursts, it's just fun. Just makes my little heart happy to watch that happen. For the tentacles, they're best when they get fat and skinny and make them swirl. There's no real science to it, except when I've looked at a lot of different types of jellyfish to try to discover, is generally the thicker, fatter, more ribbony types of tentacles are in the center, and then there's really like linear ones that can trail out beyond that. But look at how that color just moves around inside those shapes, and you can mix several colors in there. If it doesn't move very much, because sometimes I would find like, gee whiz, I'd put that down and it wasn't satisfying, I just added more water to it, touched the pen to it again, and got that whole thing moving. These brush markers have a fine tip to them, so you can get a relatively fine line as you get off to the end of your drawing, end of your tentacles. And what I have discovered too is that when you dip them in water, you're putting them into a puddle of water here, the color that will come off immediately, since it has touched water and has soaked up a little bit of water, that is going to be a lighter line, I guess, in value. So if you want a really pale orange line for one of your tentacles, then go ahead and draw one while it's still damp from having touched water, because it'll just have a lighter value. So while the tentacles down below are drying, I'm just going to fill out the rest of the bell. And you can see some of the color just moved along with it because it was still wet from up above, so it just kept moving. Once it was all completely dry, I can paint one of the tentacles right over top of a tentacle that's there, and none of that underneath lifts up. So I'm not going to get any mess. I can just paint right over top of something, draw right over top of it, and everything underneath stays put, which is kind of helpful in some circumstances. If you use water-based markers, that can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. So if you're somebody who has ever struggled with that and tried to figure out how to not lift everything up, then these markers might be something you're interested in. They do come in 60 colors now. I'll link to all of that in the doobly-doo down below. The paper I'm working on, just FYI, is Canson XL. And for a lot of water-based markers, I use this paper. It's real inexpensive. And usually when I'm using markers, I'm doing a little bit more of craft type of things anyway. So less expensive is good. I'm not looking for the pricey papers. But it has a good surface for moving around the pens and the color in a way that's not going to pill up necessarily on the paper when you're using a technique like this. And it's also not so toothy that it becomes a problem with the pens. So I'm just having fun layering on more and more of these tentacles. Once I was happy with all of the transparent ones, I started putting in the ones in pen. And you can see you can get a nice fine line with these, which is good. But as you get to the point where the pen has not been dipped in water, as it's been making the transparent portions, you can see the color does come back. It gets a little darker again. I put these into plastic sleeves, bookmark sleeves. I'll put a link to that in the supply list down below in case you want to make some gifts. Bookmarks are excellent gifts, especially for your reader friends, or maybe to get people to start reading if they haven't already developed a good habit. Now, you could do other subjects too. I'll just do a couple of leaves to show you kind of what you can do with plants. There's a whole video in which I did multicolored leaves layering over top of each other, and I'll link to that at the end of this video as well as in the doobly-doo down below if you want to see more on that. But here I'm just painting the leaf and letting the color run inside of the water puddle. Like super easy, just like we've been doing. You can paint a leaf right over top of a previously drawn stem, and the stem won't bleed. Your leaf can just overlap over top of anything that you've drawn down below, which is helpful. You can make it really loose and watercolory and let the color completely fade away and do all kinds of cool bloomy things like I'm doing in this particular one. Or the two to the right are done a little more carefully, trying to fill in all the leaves more completely, but getting a little more complex with it. So it depends on you and your style, what you'd like to accomplish with it. I could also see this technique done with butterflies and flowers, all sorts of things. So let your creativity roam. But before you get roaming, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button on your way out, because I'm going to be back in a couple days. I put out videos Tuesdays and Saturdays and would love to see you again for some more art. In the meantime, get out there and create something every day. Hit the like button, and I will see you in a couple days. Bye-bye.